My name is Stavros Lambrinidis. I'm the European Union Ambassador to the United Nations. And I am extremely pleased and honored to be able to welcome all of you in the room and to see a room on this critical issue so packed, I think fills everyone with great hope, certainly me. Now, as we convene this week for the Commission of the Status of Women, this event here of the Group of Friends for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls is one of the most critical ones. The Group of Friends has 96 members from all over the world, and they are united to finally put an end to violence against women and girls. In the current context of increasing pushback on women's rights, we must reiterate, men and women, the importance to keep on pushing forward on gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. Friends, a gender-equal world will only be possible when gender-based violence and its drivers are eradicated. Gender-based violence is a scourge. It affects all countries, and we must address it collectively for every woman and every girl. Now, this is why we are here today, to discuss how we can best do this. 30 years after the adoption of the Beijing Platform of Action, we will take stock of progress, intensify the gaps remaining, and discuss how we can bridge them. Now, this cannot be done alone. It doesn't take a village, it takes a globe, it takes a world. It takes joining forces between governments, international organizations, and civil society to focus on what works, what has delivered results, what hasn't, and to collectively agree to push forward. Before this job, in the 2010s, I was the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights. I traveled around the world, and women's rights, and especially eliminating violence against women, was one of my priorities as one of the European Union's key priorities in the world. And I have to tell you, I did find then that laws are extremely important. Institutions that are independent and that monitor governments and that ensure that those laws are applied to stop that violence are critical. But I also learned that that is not enough. I was here in New York in one of my visits. I was speaking at NYU to many students, and I was mentioning about a country in the world where the European Union's work had supported a government in passing the first ever laws in that country to criminalize violence against women. And frankly, I was and I am very proud of that. But there was a student in that room from that country. And she took the floor and she said, Mr. Special Representative, thank you very much. Really appreciate what you did. Seriously, sincerely, do. But you're talking about the law eliminating violence against women, and especially also including eliminating and criminalizing female genital cutting. And she said, I want you to know that I was cut in spite of this law. Because in my village, if this didn't happen, my family would be ostracized. I would not be able to get married. So thank you for the law. But unless this translates into something that affects not just this, but this, the hearts and minds is not going to be effective. And I mention this to celebrate in this room every one of you who is from civil society around the world. It cannot happen without you. We are grateful for you. Their hearts and minds, the ownership of the human rights agenda, of the gender equality agenda, of the violence against women agenda, has to be done on the ground. And civil society, together with governments, have to be able to join forces to get it done. And our support has to focus on civil society. So We look forward to hearing from you, including from actors on the ground, so that we drive forward the accountability and urgency needed to finally put an end to violence against all women and girls. Without further ado, I have the immense honor and pleasure to introduce Commissioner Labib for Equality, Preparedness and Crisis Management in the European Commission, the European Union's executive arm. Commissioner, you are a supremely strong champion for gender equality with a passion for combating all forms of violence. As of recently, you have been a driving force in the adoption of a new European Union roadmap for women's rights, because the European Union looks at women's rights in the EU first and foremost. You cannot be doing this around the world unless you get your own house in order. And I am very pleased to be able to give you the floor. Commissioner Labib.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it's a privilege to be with you today for this very important discussion. Violence is a stain on our community. Violence at home, violence at work, violence in our communities. It must end. 1 in 3 women has experienced violence or sexual violence. More rights, more freedom, and more possibilities. This is the only way possible. Violence against women must be relegated to the dustbin of history. Our group of friends is united by a shared commitment to fight all violence against women and girls. And since 2020, it has grown to 96 member and observer states. Today, we renew our pledge to eliminate violence against women and girls by 2030. Ending gender-based violence is not just a political commitment, it's a moral imperative and a legal obligation. As chair of the group of friends, the EU is working to ensure that laws are enforced, perpetrators are held responsible, and survivors get the support and justice they deserve. Dear friends, the EU is taking decisive action. Just last year, we adopted the first ever EU law addressing this issue, the Directive on Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. This directive lays out comprehensive measures to protect, support, and provide access to justice for victims of violence, no matter where they live or travel in the EU. It also tackles cyber violence, making the most common forms of cyber violence a crime in every member state. The directive requires member states to develop national action plans, and we are funding initiatives to help put this new directive into action. In 2023, we also took the major step of acceding as the EU to the Istanbul Convention on preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence. Dear friends, in today's turbulent times, gender equality is clearly under threat. That's why just last week, the European Commission adopted the Roadmap for Women's Rights. This roadmap sets out a long-term vision for gender equality, putting women's rights at the heart of all EU policies and actions. It reaffirms the EU's 100% commitment to gender equality. The roadmap addresses 8 main women's rights principles, with freedom from gender-based violence at the forefront. But it's not only through law and policy that we are taking action. Each year, around 25 million euros are earmarked for women's specialist services, such as support centers, shelters, helplines, and sexual violence referral centers. Dear friends, the EU is a global leader in fighting gender-based violence. We are co-leader of the Generation Equality Forum's Action Coalition on Gender-Based Violence, and the initiator and chair of the Group of Friends for the Elimination of Violence against Women and Girls. And with the UN, we set up the EU-UN Spotlight Initiative with a budget of 500 million euros. This initiative's comprehensive approach is delivering lasting results to end violence against women and girls. It is one of the 12 UN high-impact initiatives. We have also launched the ACT program on advocacy, coalition building, and transformative feminist action to end violence against women. This program strengthens the leadership of women's rights organizations and supports advocacy, campaigning, and policymaking across Africa and Latin America. Dear friends, violence against women and girls is not just a women's issue. It shakes the foundation of our entire society. It threatens our core values of equality, justice, and human dignity. But awareness is not enough. Words are not enough. Change demands action, accountability, and the courage to say enough. A world free from violence is not a dream. Together, we can make it a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Commissioner. And indeed, you mentioned at the end, last week, Secretary General, in his speech for the International Women's Day, recognized the powerful impact of partnerships with which we can collectively work to drive systemic change with real, tangible results. And he highlighted in particular the Spotlight Initiative, this flagship initiative between the European Union and the United Nations to eliminate violence against women and girls. Spotlight, dear friends, is not just another program. It is a tried and tested model with more transformative and sustainable results in the fight against gender-based violence than we've seen in a long time. Together with the United Nations and partner countries, the European Union prevented, according to the Secretary General's speech as well, 21 million women and girls in the past years from experiencing gender-based violence. And we are now accompanying this with a second phase. And we invite you, strongly invite you all to join us. Now, speaking of the UN and the partnership, the leadership of Sima Bahous, the Executive Director of UN Women, is known to everyone in this room. She is working around the clock for years to advance gender equality in the world at large. And as she so accurately once called SDG 5, she said it's a docking station for its potential in unlocking stagnation in all the other SDGs. Indeed, the facts are clear. You're not going to develop the world if half its population is not participating in it, or if it's being repressed from doing so when it wants to. Friends, UN Women plays a crucial role in coordinating efforts to end violence against women and girls and to achieve gender equality through initiatives like the Spotlight Initiative, ACT, and WIDE. Dear Sima, the floor is yours. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Lambrinidis. Thank you very much also, Commissioner Labib, for a wonderful speech. My colleagues, Under-Secretary General Melissa Fleming, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues and friends, good morning. I would like to thank the Group of Friends for the Elimination of Violence against Women and Girls for the invitation to speak today. It is an honor to join you in this moment of reckoning, in this moment of reconfirmation and reaffirmation, and of our resolve. 30 years ago in Beijing, the world made a commitment that no woman or girl would live in fear, that the rights and dignity of every woman and girl were not ideals, but guarantees, and that violence would not be inevitable, but unthinkable. 3 days ago, member states recommitted to that promise through a forward-looking, strong political declaration. In it, 3 paragraphs were dedicated to the scourge of violence against women, including a standalone paragraph on eliminating violence that occurs through or is amplified by the use of technology. Excellencies, the Secretary General report on Beijing Plus 30 that we have made says that we have made strides. Women's rights are enshrined in global norms. Today, more women hold leadership positions than ever before. Legal protections against gender-based violence exist in nearly every country. Yet, the numbers also tell a sad story. 1 in 3 women experiences violence in her lifetime. Every 10 minutes, a woman or a girl is killed by someone she should have been able to trust. And the digital revolution, once a promise of connection and progress, is now a battleground where women face harassment, deep fake exploitation, and abuse at an unprecedented scale. We have the data, and we have the knowledge, and we have the tools. Violence against women is not inevitable. It is entirely preventable. The question is no longer what must be done, but why are we not doing it faster? I leave you with these 3 solutions. First, we must adopt a whole-of-government and a whole-of-society approach. Countries that integrate prevention strategies across health, education, justice, and digital governance see dramatic declines in intimate partner violence. This is not theory, it is proof. Yet, implementation drags and political will wavers. How many more women must suffer before promises turn into actions? Delay is not just negligence, it is a choice, and its cost is measured in lives of women and girls. Second, we must invest in feminist movements, not as an afterthought, but not with symbolic gestures, but with real, sustained, transformative funding. History is clear. The most powerful force in driving policy change is a strong, autonomous women's movement. Yet these women movements remain extremely underfunded, receiving less than 1% of the official development assistance worldwide. Meanwhile, women human rights defenders face threats, attacks, and intimidation. They are forced to fight with one hand tied behind their backs. This is a betrayal to all women and girls. If we are to dismantle systems of violence, we must resource the very movements that challenge them. Excellencies, the EU-UN Spotlight Initiative has shown us the way, centering grassroots women's organizations, shifting power, and directing funding where it matters most. The Act to End Violence Against Women program also proves that investing in feminist movements is not charity, it is catalytic. It builds intersectional alliances, strengthens advocacy, and tackles urgent threats from child marriage to digital violence. This is not just investment, this is transformation and justice in motion. Third, we must strengthen accountability. Commitments without enforcements are illusions. Policies without funding are theatrics. When survivors seek justice and find only indifference, it is not just a failure. Again, I repeat, it is a betrayal. And indeed, today, less than 10% of women who experience violence report it to the police, a shocking indictment of the justice system meant to protect them. This is impunity in action, and it must end. We need independent oversight, survivor-centered justice, and a global intolerance for impunity. Governments must ensure survivors have access to justice, to protection, and redress. So, colleagues, excellencies, at this critical milestone, 30 years on from Beijing, we cannot allow inertia to stall us. We cannot allow opposition to silence us. We cannot allow half measures to define us. A world free from violence against all women and girls is not a dream. It is not a utopian vision. It is a necessity for peace, for prosperity, for the dignity of all women and girls and all humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Director. Now, dear friends, the program has a family photo that Melissa and I decided we're going to flip the script because it's a family photo for all the principals and the ministers. But frankly, I think we all feel that the protagonists in this room are not just us, but frankly you. So what I'm going to ask the people that I will call now is to come and stand there, facing here. I will ask all of you to stand up if you want to, and then we will take a photo from here, sorry to the photographers if I surprise them, of us and the whole room celebrating this very, very important event and celebrating everyone here. So, first, now listen carefully for those who have to come here in the front line, and if not everyone fits here, then also take some of the corridor. Panelists and high-level speakers to go forward. Then, ministers and high-level representatives from the group of friends to also come join. Finally, all permanent representatives from delegations part of the group of friends to come join. After we take the photo, I am deeply honored that Undersecretary General for Global Communications, Melissa Fleming, has agreed to take over as the moderator for the rest of the event. Melissa, what a pleasure to have you. Thank you. All right, so those I mentioned, please, there. Let's do it. Oh, yes, you can. Just say no. Now, we can't do anything about that, but let's, we'll just...
Okay. That looks like it was an energetic break to get everybody back in tune. Thank you, everybody. Can we get started on the next segment, please? Thank you very much. I know part of this is amazing to just network and get to know each other. And thank you for standing up. And this photo will become iconic for this very important day. So thank you also, Ambassador Lambrinidis, and also Commissioner Lahib, and also to the Executive Director of UN Women, Bahous, for very powerful words, and also, most importantly, your leadership, meaningful leadership in advancing global efforts to eliminate violence against women and girls. And I'm honored now to moderate the rest of this discussion. And I was introduced, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm Melissa Fleming, and I'm Undersecretary General for Global Communications here at the United Nations. And my role here is to introduce you to the amazing panel of speakers that we have this afternoon. As we've heard, this event takes place at a critical moment, 30 years after the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action. And while commitments to end violence against women and girls have grown, the commitments have grown, unfortunately, progress remains way too slow, and we heard a lot of examples of that here. The daily reality that women and girls live through of violence, discrimination, and impunity. And we're here to say together, this must stop. Let's use this 30th year and this 30th anniversary to renew our commitments and really to press for accountability. And reflect not just on the progress, but we need to identify and face the challenges and really ensure that these commitments that we'll be making here during this CSW will translate into more action. That's why the theme today is accountability. We know that violence against women is not inevitable, and we also know that it is preventable. And we have more evidence before on what it takes to prevent violence and really to demand for the justice that remains so elusive and to stop the impunity that remains the norm. So this requires stronger accountability mechanisms, it requires sustained investment, and it requires political will at all levels. And so to go deeper into this, I'm honored to introduce our panelists who are leaders in advocacy, policy, and frontline action, who will share their insights on what accountability in action looks like. And I'm sure we're going to get some inspiration too. Also, where we're falling short and what needs to be done. So my first panelist is Terry Ince, a longtime advocate for gender justice and who serves as the founder and convener of the Committee of Trinidad and Tobago for the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, S-E-D-A-W, CEDAW. CEDAW. We don't need to learn another acronym, but we need to know that this is advancing in her country. She's worked extensively on advancing policy reforms and legal protections for women and girls, ensuring national accountability to international commitments like CEDAW. Ms. Ince, grateful if you could share your insights on how governments can strengthen accountability mechanisms, both nationally but also internationally, and to ensure that these commitments translate into action. And also, we heard about the role of civil society. What role do they have? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Excellencies, oh, I'm not on?
Now you're on.
No. Excellencies, it is indeed my honor and privilege to contribute to this dialogue on driving accountability. to end violence against women and girls while taking stock of 30 years after the fourth conference of women in Beijing. So what can governments do? How can governments strengthen accountability mechanisms? Well, governments can strengthen the accountability mechanism by dedicating appropriate resources to these mechanisms. National governments can create appropriately funded and staffed bodies that are consistent with the international commitments made. For example, the CEDAW Committee, the CEDAW Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Governments can start identifying and amending and/or abolishing existing laws, regulations, customs, and practices which constitutes discrimination against women. Governments can ensure access to justice is survivor-centered and does not directly or indirectly perpetrate violence and discrimination against women. Governments can be ahead of the curve and strengthen accountability of technology platforms by subscribing to common standards which would allow for detection and prevention of technology-facilitated violence against women and girls. And this will allow safe and more respectful online spaces, because as we know, when CEDAW was brought into fore, no one was thinking about technology-facilitated violence against women, among other climate justice. So now that those things are prevalent in our society, we need to adjust. And those are some of the things that the government can do. So what role can civil society play? Well, civil society is pivotal in holding policymakers accountable by ensuring that policies are addressing the lived experiences of women and girls. And this will require civil society to be contributing to policy making through meaningful consultation. Civil society must also ensure that they're engaging at the community level in order to convey accurately what is needed to ensure policies and that they're relevant and implementable. So what I have just said, it's both of us, all of us, just as we've heard. It's an all of society, all of country approach that is needed. Civil society must be uncompromised and unafraid to speak truth to power by holding themselves and policymakers accountable. Those are some of the things that we can do.
Thank you so much for those concrete measures. They seem to resonate here, so really appreciate it. And our next panelist is Leila Zuleika Makhmudova, a leading advocate for civil society engagement as well as gender justice. She is a member of the Spotlight Initiative Civil Society Global Reference Group and the Global Act Civil Society Steering Committee, which works to ensure civil society organizations are at the forefront of ending violence against women and girls. Despite overwhelming evidence that women's rights organizations and feminist movements are among the most effective forces in preventing and responding to violence against women and girls, they remain critically underfunded. And so could you tell us what systemic changes are needed to ensure that women's rights organizations receive sustained, flexible, and accessible funding that is so critical to their work? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, dear moderator. Dear organizers, dear speakers, dear participants, it is a very loaded moment to represent women's rights organizations in Central Asia. In the times of unprecedented cuts of international assistance and development, and especially witnessing direct withdrawals of commitments of our allies from causes of gender justice and anti-violence efforts. As Her Excellency Labib said, it is a turbulent times. It is unusual to ask this question in the room of leaders, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Aren't we all scared? This compilation of emotional burden with foggy prospects of who we are the ones on whom you can lean on, is exactly what we, survivors of violence, face. And my hope today is that when we face what is called turbulent times, we are going to stand in solidarity with each other. My hope is that our solidarity are actions of standing up for each other. So those of us who are falling know that we have a net that will hold us grounded. My work as a Central Asian feminist grassroots organizer at Femagora is practicing solidarity by being here for my peers, leaders of women's rights organizations. Part of our collective work at Femagora is to travel through our Central Asian valleys, mountains, riversides, deserts, to meet our kins, feminist organizers across the region. And whatever stigmatized the topic of money in women's movements can be, with the same level of trust, we talk about it. Being aware that the space I am now in is very different. I am in Global North at the Intergovernmental Platform. I still want to talk about money, and it flows globally. And my speech is directed to intergovernmental programs and international NGOs, state agencies, private foundations, each actor which is in the position of grant makers in the global majority countries and regions like mine. Regarding financial flows, international assistance spaces perpetuate the notion that those actors and grassroots activists are opposites. These actors do grant-making programs, while grassroots receive. Funders wield resources, while movements are expected to be resilient until those resources arrive. This structure inherently places power in the hands of those who give, while portraying those who receive as vulnerable and lacking capacity. Even in spaces built on trust and accountability, we often see this dichotomy between donors and beneficiaries. Here, we all come to answer the important questions of how to sustain women's rights organizing. Yet, despite the best intentions, many often leave with unanswered questions. You may realize that different communities require different approaches to funding. What works in one area may be unsafe or ineffective on another. It is impossible to fully grasp and experience the intricacies of every and each context. Instead of coming to the spaces with the intention to understand how to be a better funder, I invite you to acknowledge the capacity of grassroots as funders. I invite you to provide resources which grassroots movements will have decision-making power to direct, manage, organize the funds distribution themselves. We know grassroots movements are resilient and still do not recognize the expertise which builds this resilience. With the extreme scarcity of funding, grassroots communities sustain our own livelihoods, which shows the evidence of resourcefulness in trust-based social networks, expertise in local contexts, and ability to map and navigate systems we live in. In Central Asian contexts, we know that during disaster and conflicts, grassroots practitioners and our self-organized collectives were the first to respond to the emergency from the day one. We stay while everybody else leaves because it's our home, community, our ecosystem. We know that grassroots communities have systems of financial and other resource distribution when all other funders have never even imagined reaching those localities. I call you to rethink the role of grassroots movements not only as recipients, but also as funders, philanthropists, and donors of our own realities. Why do we still keep on being stuck in the models which deprive grassroots to be donors and to move the money? The latest report of Human Rights Funders Network spotlights the lack of funding and especially the lack of flexible funding to global majority movements, where 88% of human rights funding stays in the global north. Furthermore, flexible funding mostly stays in global north as well. Only 1 out of 10 grant dollars is granted directly to local NGOs, and as flexible support in the region of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Unfortunately, we don't have separate data on Central Asia because our region is always merged with other regions as secondary and marginal. So, enacting solidarity today through trust in grassroots as donors of our own communities is a long-term solution to the economic injustice and marginalization of grassroots feminist communities as viable decision makers on issues that affect us. We as grassroots are here to co-govern resources dedicated to our region and work as equal stewards of our shared development commons. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leila Mahmoudova, and I hope that you find your net here as well, and not just across Central Asia. Thank you for those insights. And our next panelist is Dr. Kemi da Silva Ibru, a specialist healthcare physician who is dedicated to improving the lives of women and girls through medical practice, social activism, and wider public advocacy against gender-based violence. Today, she's also here in her capacity as a member of the Act to End Violence Against Women Civil Society Steering Committee. Dr. Silva Ibru, around the world, conflict, crisis, climate change, economic instability, coupled with rapidly evolving technology and a growing backlash on women's rights. All of these things are undermining efforts to eliminate violence against women and girls. So in your experience, what strategies have been effective in maintaining momentum and ensuring that policies and interventions can work and remain a priority despite all of the obstacles and opposition that we're probably all aware of? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Well, good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my fellow activists and dear friends. I'm pleased to be here representing my own organization, the Women at Risk International Foundation, WARIF, a nonprofit organization addressing the prevalence of gender-based violence in Nigeria. And I'm also here representing the Act to End Violence Against Women and Girls program, Global Civil Society Steering Committee, as the West and Central Africa representative. ACT is a new game-changing commitment between the European Commission and UN Women as co-leaders of the Action Coalition on Gender-Based Violence in collaboration with the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. Now, we're all aware that significant strides have been made by member states in ending violence against women. However, we also know that the prevalence of gender-based violence remains 1 in 3 women who will experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. And as we approach 2030, this is a human rights issue that must be addressed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at this critical juncture. There is a backlash against gender equality and the shrinking civic space with devastating consequences for women and girls. Around the world, we're seeing increasing resistance to gender equality efforts, and this is manifesting in numerous ways. This has legislative rollbacks or stagnation and regressive laws. There's a defunding of the women's rights initiatives across the world, and there is a rise of anti-feminist narratives. The UN Secretary General Beijing +30 report found that 1 in 4 countries reported that this backlash has hampered progress on gender equality in the past 5 years. A fine example is in Africa, where the recent upholding of the Women's Amendment Act of 2015, which prohibits female genital mutilation in the Gambia, was upheld. And though this outcome was an encouragement, it also serves as a warning that our rights are not guaranteed. These trends are undermining our efforts to prevent and respond to the violence against women and girls effectively. Now, one of the greatest obstacles in ending violence against women is this entrenched culture of impunity that allows perpetrators, whether they're intimate partners, political figures, and even armed groups, to act without consequence. Globally, less than 10% of women who experience violence report it to the police. This is either out of fear or the stigmatization of their communities, or a lack of trust in the justice system. And across the world, as the UN Executive Director, Madame Bahous, mentioned, women's rights organizations are the lifeline to these women and girls experiencing various forms of violence by delivering critical frontline and essential services. Yet, these organizations remain severely underfunded, with less than 1% of the official development assistance reaching them, according to an OECD analysis. Organizations like mine, WARIF, in countries like Nigeria, who operate on a community level, are often the only networks of support available to these women at risk. And we rely on this targeted funding to drive meaningful change in many of these communities, without which essential services such as shelter, legal aid, and psychosocial support for survivors of violence are disrupted. This compromises both their immediate care and the long-term sustainability of our programs, eroding the trust within the affected communities. As civil society organizations, we are the experts of what women and girls need. We hold the knowledge, the connections to communities, and we work tirelessly to develop the innovative solutions and to adapt the support in the different contexts. This could be from climate disasters that we see to global emergencies like the COVID-19 and to conflict situations. We know what works and the needs of the survivors, yet many are now at risk of closure or operating with very limited resources. However, we are not here to spend all day talking about the challenges, but also to propose concrete solutions to accelerate our collective efforts in ending violence against women and girls. Together with fellow activists and other women's rights organizations, under the ACT program, we are calling for 3 priority actions. 1, to make bold investments in prevention and responses to ending violence against women and girls. The cost of inaction is significant. Beyond the incalculable human suffering, conservative estimates indicate that governments lose up to 4% of their GDP due to violence against women. So investing in preventing and eliminating violence against women is not only a human rights imperative, it also saves lives, and it can also save costs. We need to see these investments in evidence-based interventions, changing harmful social norms that are prevalent in many of these communities, engaging men and boys as allies in breaking down these harmful stereotypes. The second point we would like to raise is that the Act to End the Violence Against Women's and Girls Program's shared advocacy agenda wants bold investments to women's rights organizations in the strengthening of financing, protection, and support of these organizations. Because as many have said here today, the studies have confirmed that the role of these organizations, like WARIF and other sister organizations here in this room, are often the most critical factor in the reduction of large-scale violence. And flexible long-term funding and investments are necessary to sustain them. Urgent action needs to be taken to end violence against women, as well as the human rights defenders that strengthen the protective mechanisms and continue the work in the field. The last point that we would like to see is the strengthening of accountability, access to justice, and a full and effective implementation of laws to prevent and respond to violence against women. We need to build on our successes as we strengthen our legal frameworks with robust protections for women's rights. We need to leverage on strategic legal frameworks that have already been adopted, like the AU Convention on Ending Violence Against Women in Africa that was held in February of 2015. This represented a historic milestone in Africa, signaling a continent-wide recognition of the need for stronger protection for women. We also have to leverage against the model law on tackling tech-facilitated violence as developed by my sisters in Latin America. In conclusion, violence against women and girls is preventable. There is evidence of what works. We need to see governments invest in comprehensive approaches to unlock financing through the various sectors of health, education, social service, and protection. Let us build together. Let us have coalitions that amplify our voices and enhance the collective advocacy efforts. Let's broaden alliances with greater intersectionality. For by committing to these strategies, we can effectively combat violence against women and girls and safeguard the invaluable gains that we have all made together. Let us all reaffirm our dedication to this critical fight for this human rights and equality. The time to act is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Da Silva Ibru, for your perspective and your blueprint. I think you've got a lot of agreement here. Thank you. And our next speaker is Anne Hilos Nascimento, who is a youth leader for the Generation Equality Action Coalition for Feminist Action for Climate Justice and works as the National Articulator. I don't know if I've ever heard of that title, but this is maybe a new generation title. The National Articulator at the Brazilian youth-led organization called Engajamundo. She is also a climate education coordinator at the Brazilian Center for Climate Justice. And you know, there is a link between violence against women and girls and climate change, maybe. One of the links is that these are the two of the most pressing global challenges of our time. So if you could tell us how climate change is exacerbating violence against women and creating risks for women environmental human rights defenders as they strive to protect our natural resources and their territories and to call for climate action.
So much. Closer. Thank you so much, Melissa, for the question. Thank you so much for this invitation as well. And to start conversation, I'm going to provide some data. And according to UNICEF, last year, the climate crisis took more than 1 million children from schools in Brazil. And there is this particular disaster, climate disaster, that we had in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, also in Brazil, where we noticed that the floods hit the most the Black neighborhoods and poor communities, reflecting the environmental racism that these communities live daily. And most of the people who live in these communities are women and children. And these are in shelters during this climate disaster were also denounced for sexual and gender-based violence. Our Ministry of Women had to act right away on this. And all of this pretty much reflects how climate change aggravates other human rights violations, like the ones that women and girls face every day. And some of the solutions for all of this can be disaster risk reduction plans, plans that will tackle the prevention of these disasters, of the extreme weather events, that will talk about actions that the governments and civil society can do during the events, and also the post-disaster. Because like I mentioned, a lot of the times, the schools are the shelters. So the children are not able to go to the schools for like a month after the disasters because they're still dealing with the post-disasters circumstances. So in these disaster reduction plans, we need the participation of the social movements. We need the participation of youth. And of course, it is a plan. We need to see it implemented. And for that, we need funds. We need funds for these plans. And also, to better apply it, of course, we need disaggregated data, data that will mention gender, data that will mention race. And when I talk about gender, I'm also talking not only about women, but about the intersections on transgender women, because a lot of times they are also facing gender-based violence during the disasters. And we also need protection for activists that are dealing with climate and environmental issues. In Brazil, we had Marielle killed. She was a councilwoman, and she used to fight for the right to adequate housing. Opposing groups killed her. Mãe Bernadette, who was a grassroots community leader, also a fighter for land and territory rights, was also killed by people who want to sell her land to the private initiatives, to do resorts on it, and etc. And this is the women, peace, insecurity, and climate intersection that we also need to tackle on our efforts. And in the Latin American region, we have this international treaty called Acordo Descaso Agreement, and it really focuses on the defenders of the land, the defenders of the territory, the human rights defenders, the environmental defenders, and it has the power to strengthen the national protection mechanism. Today, in Brazil, we have a very fragile one who is barely funded. So Brazil has already signed the Descaso Agreement, but it really needs to ratify Descaso and implement it. And of course, one solution that we can apply today is to become a commitment maker for the Generation Equality. And Generation Equality is a program convened by UN Women, and it's a program that supports alliances with different movements. I said yesterday in the European Union event that, to me, Generation Equality is the ongoing Beijing for our generation, because it really supports these interregional collaborations, collaborations with our sisters from Africa, from the Pacific region, and so many more, because a lot of our problems are similar. And we have 6 coalitions. Each one deals with a challenge on women's rights. And we also have the blueprints, and the blueprints are amazing because they are literally roadmaps about what the stakeholders, what member states can do today to tackle these problems, to face these problems. And I worked on the climate one personally, so a lot of the things that I'm saying here is on the blueprint. And also, of course, bring the movements to the space, to the decision-making, so the local ones, the youth ones, of course, and fund them, give them a space for them to meet in governmental offices, schedule meetings with them, see their opinions, because like Kimi said, they are the frontliners. They have the solutions. You just have to listen to them, give them a voice. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists for your powerful insights. And we're now going to do a switch. We were going to have another round of questions, but we have run out of time. I'm really sorry for that. But we'll now move to our high-level segment, where we'll hear from ministers and high-level representatives about the very important national efforts that are being undertaken to strengthen accountability and to eliminate violence against women and girls. And each speaker it's going to be a rapid, because we have many speakers to get to, and 3 minutes each to share their country's priorities, national strategies, and lessons learned. So I believe we do this from where you are seated, right? We do. Yes, I'm getting a thumbs up. So to begin this high-level segment, I'd like to now give the floor to Her Excellency, Mrs. Naima Ben Yahya, Minister of Solidarity, Social Inclusion, and Family of Morocco. Morocco, as a steering committee member of the Group of Friends, has played an essential role in advancing accountability measures to address violence against women and girls at the national and regional levels. The floor is yours, Minister.
I will read in Arabic to
Okay.
English
So
to
everybody,
follow.
we have interpretation, so please switch if you do not understand Arabic.
Madam Minister will read quickly in Arabic and English will follow.
Okay. Okay, I guess we don't have interpretation. We're going to do interpretation, and so first we'll have the statement in Arabic and then English will follow. Thank you.
شكرا. يسعدني اليوم أن أتناول الكلمة في هذا الحدث الجانبي المنظم من طرف مجموعة أصدقاء القضاء على العنف ضد النساء، وننوه بإحداث هذه المبادرة التي كان المغرب من بين الأعضاء المؤسسين لها، والتي ترمي إلى مواجهة ظاهرة يعاني منها العالم قاطبة وتعمل الدول على القضاء عليه بمختلف الطرق. وبالنسبة لبلدي تعتبر مناهضة العنف ضد النساء والفتيات أولوية وطنية وطنية لاعتبار العنف مساسا بحقوق الإنسان وحائلا دون تحقيق تنمية، ولا يمكن قبوله ولا تبريره بأي حال من الأحوال. ومن هذا المنطلق قامت المملكة المغربية منذ إصدار أول استراتيجية وطنية سنة 2002 بمبادرات متعددة للقضاء على العنف ضد النساء، وهي إطلاق حملات توعوية سنوية موازاة مع حملة الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة في نوفمبر من كل سنة، وقد وصلنا في سنة 2024 إلى الحملة 22. توفير مراكز الاستقبال والتوجيه مع ضمان تقديم خدمات التكفل القانوني والصحي والإيواء، وتتواجد هذه المراكز على المستوى الجهوي والمحلي. إصدار قانون مناهضة العنف ضد النساء الذي جاء بتدابير مهمة لحماية النساء والفتيات من العنف. وبالنظر لأهمية هذا القانون تم إحداث مجموعة موضوعاتية برلمانية لتقييم تتبع القانون وتقديم اقتراحات بشأنه. إحداث منصة إلكترونية مخصصة للاستماع والدعم والإرشاد والتوجيه، وتضع رهن إشارة نساء أخصائيين نفسيين واجتماعيين وقانونيين. ونظرا لكون عدم استقلالية النساء تعتبر من ضمن عوامل استمرار ظاهرة العنف ضد النساء والفتيات، فإن المغرب يواصل جهوده من أجل التمكين الاقتصادي للنساء من أجل تحقيق استقلاليتهن وحصولهن على الموارد وتعزيز التكافؤ في العلاقات داخل الأسر وفي الفضاءات العامة وفي المؤسسات. ولا بد أن نشير أن النتائج التي تم تحقيقها في هذا الصدد كانت نتيجة لعدد من العوامل، في مقدمتها التنسيق المؤسساتي والشراكة مع المجتمع المدني ومع الفاعلين الوطنيين والإقليميين والدوليين، وخصوصا المنظمات الأممية والإقليمية ذات الصلة، وانخراط المؤسسات الدستورية عن طريق تقديم تقارير وتوفير إحصائيات ومؤشرات تمكن من التتبع والتقييم.
Thank you, Excellency. I will now proceed to the translation of the text of Your Excellency in English. If you allow me. Your Excellencies,
Can you move
distinguished
the microphone a
ladies,
little closer to your face? Thank you.
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to speak at this side event organized by the Group of Friends of the Elimination of Violence Against Women. We appreciate this initiative, of which Morocco is member of the steering committee, and which aims at combating a phenomenon that affects the entire world. Countries are working to eliminate it in various ways. For my country, combating violence against women and girls is a national priority, as violence is considered a violation of human rights and obstacle to development. Based on this, the Kingdom of Morocco has undertaken several initiatives to eliminate violence against women since the issuance of the first national strategy in 2002, including launching annual awareness campaigns in parallel with the UN Secretary General's campaign in November of each year. In 2024, Morocco reached its 22nd campaign. Providing reception and guidance centers while ensuring the provision of legal, health, and shelter services. These centers are located in various regions of the kingdom at the regional and local levels. Issuing the law on combating violence against women, which includes important measures to protect women and girls from violence. Given the importance of this law, a thematic group was created in the Moroccan Parliament to evaluate its implementation and make concrete proposals regarding it. creating an electronic platform dedicated to listening, supporting, and giving guidance and counseling. This platform provides also psychological, social, and legal specialists for women. Given that women's lack of independence is a multiplier factor in the persistence of violence against women and girls, Morocco continues its efforts to empower women economically to achieve their independence and access to resources, and to promote equality in relationships within the family, in public spaces, and in institutions. It is important to emphasize that the results achieved in this regard were the outcomes of several factors. Among them, the coordination between sectors, partnerships, and cooperation with civil society, as well as with national, regional, and international actors, particularly relevant UN and regional organizations, as well as the involvement of constitutional institutions through the submission of reports, conducting studies and research, and providing indicators that allow for analyzing and evaluating the phenomenon, all aimed at improving programs to combat violence against women. Thank you.
I thank the Minister for her statement and also for the excellent translation. Thank you. And I'm pleased now to give the floor to Her Excellency, Mrs. Engtuya Ganku, State Secretary of the Ministry of Family, Labor, and Social Protection of Mongolia. Mongolia has demonstrated strong leadership in ensuring survivor-centered legal frameworks and strengthening national accountability mechanisms. And Mongolia is also a steering committee member. Thank you.
Honorable Chair and distinguished delegates, on behalf of the Government of Mongolia, I extend my sincere greetings to all distinguished delegates participating in this esteemed event. Mongolia has achieved significant milestones in protecting the rights of women and girls and ensuring gender equality over the past 30 years. Our Constitution enshrines the principle of non-discrimination, and we have implemented legislative forms to eliminate all forms of discrimination. In 2017, Mongolia's criminal code was amended to criminalize discrimination, ensuring the protection of human rights, particularly for women and girls, and safeguarding them from violence and oppression. The law on combating domestic violence has been amended to clearly define the responsibility of stakeholders in combating the violence. Currently, 7 types of assistance and services are provided to women and girls who have been subjected to violence in areas of education, health, psychology, and social protection. These services and assistance are delivered through single-window service centers and temporary shelters located at population centers. Additionally, multidisciplinary teams, which consist of general practitioners, social workers, police officers, and representatives from non-governmental organizations, are tasked to prevent and provide rapid response to domestic violence cases. In 2022, the Mongolian Parliament approved revisions to the law on legal aid, enhancing the scope of and accessibility of aid for indigenous citizens. Free legal aid is now provided to victims of all forms of sexual violence, discrimination, underage children at risk, and victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. The number of domestic violence cases in the country doubled during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, thanks to effective policy measures, the number of cases decreased by around 20% in 2023. Presently, each primarily administrative unit in the country has social workers, helping children and family in need. The government of Mongolia is committed to family-centered policy, strengthening systems to prevent children from potential risk of violence with the active participation of our citizens. We are dedicated to improving child protection within family and social environment. We will intensify our efforts to end violence against women and girls, one of the 12 priority areas of Beijing Declaration. We aim to expand comprehensive social services within the family environment to prevent from violence and ensure the active participation of civil society organizations. I wish you success at the conference and reaffirm our commitment to working diligently to achieve the goal of ending violence against women and girls. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the State Secretary from Mongolia for her statement, and I'm pleased now to give the floor to Her Excellency, Ms. Maninur Özdemir Göktaş, Minister of Family and Social Services of Turkey. Turkey has demonstrated strong leadership in advancing survivor-centered legal protections, expanding support services for survivors, and strengthening national accountability mechanisms to combat violence against women and girls. Thank you.
President, distinguished delegates, despite significant progress in the 13 years since the Beijing Platform for Action, violence against women and girls persists worldwide. Combating violence requires comprehensive state policies, ensuring their security in all aspects of life. As Turkey, with the highest level legal regulations, we are carrying out this fight as a top-level state policy based on a zero-tolerance principle. With our laws and national action plans, we focus on protecting and supporting victims while raising awareness. We provide protective and preventive services for victims of violence through specialized institutional mechanisms. Beyond this effort, we are also carrying out targeted initiatives to address the root causes of violence. We are conducting the third nationwide study on violence against women in Turkey, which will serve as a vital source of data for all stakeholders. On the other hand, we have to protect victims while addressing perpetrators to break the cycles and ensure lasting solutions. So we are implementing the development of a psychosocial intervention model for perpetrators of violence project. Honored guests, as we combat different forms of violence, we cannot overlook the evolving nature of risks. The spread of radical ideologies through digital platforms has increased hate speech, making digital violence more visible. We must collectively address the emerging risks through ethical AI governance, advanced technology literacy programs, and stronger international cooperation. Distinguished delegates, when discussing violence against women, we cannot ignore the immense hardship faced by women in Gaza. They continue to endure the devastating impacts of conflicts, violence, and displacements, often suffering in silence because of Israel's oppression. It is crucial that we acknowledge their struggles and work towards providing them with the support and protection they need to live in safety and dignity. Member States' commitments in Beijing must now turn into swift action, as this global human rights violation threatens our future and hinders sustainable development. Turkey is ready to collaborate with all partners to ending violence against women and girls, reaffirming our call to turn commitments into action for a future free from violence and discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Minister. And I'd now like to introduce Her Excellency Kelly Kumbis, Head of Delegation of New Zealand. And as a steering committee member of the Group of Friends, New Zealand has championed integrating gender-responsive policies into national action plans.
Like many countries, New Zealand has high and concerning rates of family violence and sexual violence. 1 in 3 women experience sexual assault in their lifetime, and women are 3 times as likely as men to experience intimate partner violence. New Zealand has demonstrated a strong commitment to breaking the cycle of intergenerational family violence and addressing technology-facilitated gender-based violence. In 2021, New Zealand launched its national strategy for the elimination of family violence and sexual violence, Te Aorere Kura. This strategy guides the efforts of government, tangata whenua, the Indigenous people of New Zealand, communities and specialist sectors to address the underlying causes of violence, strengthen prevention, empower the workforce, and drive community-led solutions. To implement this strategy, the government has established a board which brings together 9 government agencies to support a whole-of-government approach to strategy, policy and investment. Preventing and addressing gender-based violence that occurs through or is amplified by technology is integral to women and girls' safety, their well-being, economic empowerment and leadership. We are developing tools and resources to help women and workplaces address online harm so that women can remain confidently online. In closing, I want to acknowledge those across the globe who have been working to address violence against women and girls, past and present. We can only achieve change by working together and learning together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Coombs. And we're running out of time. I hate to do this, but if we could, if our next speakers could be even briefer, I'd really be grateful, because apparently we're going to need to vacate the room. As you know, there's lots going on here. So I'd next like to give the floor to Her Excellency Isabelle Rome, Ambassador at Large for Human Rights of France. And France has become a strong advocate for accountability in eliminating violence against women and girls, driving progressive national and international efforts. The floor is yours, Ambassador.
Ministers, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin by thanking the group of Friends for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls for the organization of this important event of the elimination of violence against women and girls. Violence against women is a systematic issue present in all our societies without exception. Eliminating violence against women and girls is a sine qua non condition to equality between women and men. How can we envisage the emancipation, parity, and equal participation of women when a large proportion of them are harassed, mutilated, beaten, or even deprived of their most basic rights? Gender equality has been a priority for the French President, Emmanuel Macron, since 2018. As a result, concrete measures were taken by the government to address the difficult and often urgent situations faced by women victims of violence. It is, for example, now possible for victims to contact a helpline 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and to obtain protection orders that used to take 6 days but can now be issued in 24 hours. In addition, the deployment of serious dangers telephones enable victims to report imminent danger in real time, and anti-reconciliation bracelets, which ensure compliance with contact bans imposed by the judge. We have also increased the number of emergency accommodation places by 80%, offering shelter to those who need it. In addition, the creation of specialized domestic violence units in each court and tribunal, a project that I have long supported as a former magistrate, will make it possible to centralize and improve the handling of cases of domestic violence, guaranteeing more appropriate and better coordinated justice. Through its feminist foreign policy, France combats all forms of physical, sexual, conflict-related, psychological, and economic violence online or facilitated by technology and artificial intelligence. It fights against female genital mutilation, forced marriages, human trafficking, and prostitution. France supports the ratification and adoption of ambitious international texts on combating gender-based violence, such as the Council of Europe Convention, now known as the Istanbul Convention, and the resolution tabled with the Netherlands of the United Nations General Assembly, intensification of efforts to prevent and eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls. France also financially supports the Global Survivors Fund that was launched during the G7 French presidency in 2019 and was co-funded by Nadia Mourad and Denise Mukwege. In combating conflict-related violence, France is strongly involved in the fight against impunity and helping survivors rebuild their lives. Within the EU and working closely with other member states, France supports an external policy that promotes and protects the rights of women and girls and gender equality and campaigns for ambitious public policies to eradicate violence against women and girls in all EU countries. Ladies and gentlemen, as Ambassador for Human Rights today, but as former Minister for Gender Equality and as a former judge, I have been a first-hand witness of how destructive gender-based violence can be. They are not only destroying the lives of women and girls, they are destroying our families, our societies, and depriving them of the energy, intelligence, and projects of half of humanity. Eradicating this violence is not just a question of justice. It is a fundamental issue for all of us and for our children. Let's work towards a future free from violence against women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your strong words, Ambassador. And if I can ask the next speakers if they could cut their speeches a little bit, I would be really grateful because we're losing the room. I now invite Her Excellency Mrs. Agnė Bilotaitė, Member of Parliament of Lithuania. Lithuania has prioritized strengthening national legislation, institutional frameworks, and survivor support services in response to gender-based violence. Over to you.
Yeah, it's okay. First of all, I'm very delighted to be here, and thank you for this opportunity to share our experience. The Beijing conference was significant for the development of gender equality in Lithuania. But despite that, domestic violence is still the biggest threat to women in Lithuania. 1 of 3 women in Lithuania has experienced domestic violence. In 2011, we achieved a great victory in the fight against violence. What we did? We adopted the law on protection for domestic violence. It enabled the state to prosecute the offenders instead of the victim. In 2023, the domestic violence protection order became operational. It made the great change. Since then, 32,000 domestic violence orders have been issued. This order allows us to quickly protect a person who has experienced domestic violence. The abuser is obligated to temporarily move out of the house for 15 days. During that time, specialized assistance centers provide with all the necessary assistance. The state-funded centers already provide help and assistance for more 33,000 people. We have 25 centers that covers entire country. Prevention, of course, is crucial, and in reducing violence, it is so important. So we have increased public funding for preventive measures and programs, but it is still not enough. We started trainings for the police officers on how to work with people who are victims of violence. And of course, public attitudes. Public attitudes about violence are changing, and this makes us optimistic about the future. And I have a dream, to live in community without violence against women. And I hope that all together we have this result in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and it's great to have a Member of Parliament here. Thank you so much. And I'm next honored to introduce Her Excellency Honorable Rebecca Buttigieg, Parliament's Secretary of Malta. And Malta has made notable investments in improving legal accountability and enhancing service provision for survivors of violence against women and girls.
As we mark 30 years since the adoption, we must acknowledge that the Beijing Platform for Action, too many women and girls still face violence daily. Prevention must remain at the core of our efforts, requiring not only robust
I think it works. Can you test?
No.
Now
Okay.
we go. Here we go.
Okay, technical difficulty. So as we mark 30 years since its adoption, we must acknowledge that despite progress, too many women and girls are still facing violence daily. Prevention must remain at the core of our efforts, requiring not only robust legal frameworks, but also deep societal transformation. My country, Malta, has taken concrete steps to strengthen its legal and constitutional response to gender-based violence. The introduction of the Gender-Based Violence and Domestic Violence Act has ensured that our national laws align with the highest international standards, particularly the Istanbul Convention. Complementing this, we have also enhanced support structures for survivors with expanded access to emergency shelters, legal aid, psychological services, and a 24/7 national helpline. However, legal frameworks alone are not enough. The fight against gender-based violence requires challenging the deeply ingrained social norms that perpetuate cycles of abuse. Education and awareness are fundamental pillars of our prevention efforts. In Malta, we have implemented targeted programs in schools and nationwide campaigns aimed at instilling a culture of respect and equality. Specialized training for law enforcement and judicial officers has also been reinforced to ensure that institutions respond to cases with the sensitivity and urgency that they demand. Crucially, we recognize that engaging men and boys is essential in dismantling harmful stereotypes and fostering social change. So beyond our national initiatives, Malta remains a strong advocate for enhanced accountability mechanisms and increased funding to combat gender-based violence globally. Violence against women and girls is not inevitable, it is preventable. And so as we reaffirm the principles of the Beijing Platform for Action, Malta stands ready to collaborate with all of you here to drive lasting change for women and girls everywhere. Thank you.
I thank Honorable Rebecca Buttigieg. And now we have one final speaker who is in the room, and then all of us, including the new participants who have joined for the next meeting, can listen to the video message from the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohamed. But I would now like to give the floor to Her Excellency Ambassador Elina Kalku, Permanent Representative of Finland. Finland continues to lead in feminist foreign policy and domestic initiatives as well, aimed at eliminating gender-based violence.
I think I have micro now. Thank you so much, Excellencies, colleagues, friends. We all know women who have experienced violence. Some may not have told us. At wartime, respect for international humanitarian law and civilian life has overall eroded in a dangerous way. To prevent violence, we must first of all listen to those who have experienced violence. Their stories are a call to action and central in shaping our responses and policies. By listening, we are better equipped to raise public awareness. Let me highlight one aspect in particular. Treaties, SDGs, laws, their implementation and accountability are absolutely essential. But among key root causes are patriarchal attitudes. Another person is never a subordinate to another one. All humans are equal. Respect is the key offline and online. Another person is never owned by someone else. We need lots of high-level public appearances of our political leaders. We need media campaigns, community workshops, and school programs to foster a culture of respect and equality in an extensive way. We must engage men and boys. They need to stand up and speak. We need many more he for she campaigns. For Finland, violence against women and girls is a problem, and combating it is a national priority. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action has driven significant reforms also in Finland's national legislation. Recent examples include criminalization of female genital mutilation and inclusion of forced marriage into the human trafficking provision. We have also reformed our parental leave system to allow families with more flexibility, and fathers now take nearly twice as many paternity leave days than before. This is all about fostering equality in families, but also well-being of them. By fostering culture of empathy, respect, and equality, and not a culture of hatred, we can create a ripple effect of positive change that benefits everyone. We can all be part of the solution. This must not be the dark hour. This must be the time for hope and pushing for progress. I thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful speech and a wonderful way to conclude, Ambassador. And last but not least, and for all of us, I would now like to play a video message that Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, recorded for you.
Excellencies, dear friends and colleagues, 30 years since Beijing, let me start by honoring the tenacity, determination, and leadership of women who have fought and continue to fight for gender equality. In doing so, our brave women activists and organizations and those that join them in their struggle are not only securing rights for women and girls, but building a peaceful, sustainable, and better future for all. All this is happening in the midst of a crisis of trust in the multilateral system. Yet these platforms are a testament to what multilateralism can deliver for billions of people, especially women and girls. Despite our significant progress in the past 30 years, women and girls continue to face significant barriers, whether it's labor participation, economic empowerment, political leadership, decision-making, or even basic safety and security. 1 in 3 women will experience violence in her lifetime, with ripple effects that destroy lives, families, and societies. And we've seen firsthand how war, pandemics, climate change, and even emerging technologies perpetuate discrimination and gender violence. We have witnessed the rising tide of backlash against women's rights globally. Excellencies, we cannot afford losing decades of hard-won gains. We can leverage platforms such as this group of friends to share and implement solutions that work. We must invest in high-impact solutions that take a comprehensive approach to eliminating violence against women and girls and provide us with a blueprint for building a more equitable world. One such solution is the Spotlight Initiative. Many of you have been part of that, and we do commend you for those efforts and that belief in this particular initiative. It focuses on preventing violence, changing harmful social norms, providing high-quality services for survivors, and ensuring that perpetrators are held accountable. Across the Spotlight Initiative countries, the conviction rate for gender-based violence has doubled. By the end of this year, we will have prevented 21 million girls and women from experiencing violence. But we cannot stop there. We must adequately finance and support civil society and grassroots organizations that are working on these issues in their communities. Excellencies, if we are to deliver on the promise of Beijing, we must ensure no woman or girl is left behind in darkness, in fear, or in silence. The United Nations will do its part, together with our resident coordinators on the ground, translating global commitments into real local action, ensuring that solutions reach those who need them most. But we cannot do this alone. And so I call on governments, civil society, the private sector, and every individual who believes in the right of every woman and girl to live free from violence to join us. Together we can build a sustainable future where no one is left behind and where every woman and girl can thrive in safety and in dignity. Thank you.